Hi, thank you so much for joining us. We are broadcasting live from our 76th Street Community Services office here in Milwaukee. My name is Corey. I work on the social media team, and today we have a very interesting conversation lined up for you. Today we're going to review some of the most common questions parents have about car seats and booster seats, and we're going to be providing guidance to help ensure your most precious cargo is riding safely in your cars. Now, did you know that 73% of car seats are either not used or not installed correctly, and road injuries are the #1 cause of unintentional death in children in the United States? And it's because of that I'm so excited that Lisa Clint Simpson from Safe Kids Southeast Wisconsin is here with us today. Lisa is a certified car seat technician and a child safety advocate. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
So today we're going to talk about car seats and booster seats, and maybe to begin with, could you describe what is a certified car seat technician?
So to become a technician, you do have to go through a class. Generally, it's a 4-day class in which you do a lot of hands-on learning. So to finish the class, you do have to pass some written test and some hands-on test. And once you've done that, you are certified. It's a national certification.
And are you then able to teach and help parents who have questions about installing car seats?
So the goal of becoming a child passenger safety technician is that you are qualified to help parent and caregivers use their seats correctly, answer questions, help them install. And on top of that, I'm also an instructor. So I'm qualified to actually teach other people to become certified technicians as well.
Cool. Well, as a parent myself, I have 2 young children who are currently in car seats. I know it can be challenging sometimes to stay on top of how to make sure the car seats are installed correctly, how to make sure your kids are riding safely. So I'm just curious, maybe to begin with, can you tell us why is it so important for us to understand this and that our kids are riding safely in their car seat?
I think you said it. It's the leading cause of unintentional death in children. So we need to make sure that we can do everything possible to keep our kids safe.
Okay. Well, let's begin with maybe a rear-facing car seat and talk about what are some of the most common things that parents either have questions about or that you see as a certified car seat technician that parents are maybe getting wrong.
Okay. So more commonly, people understand they need to keep their children rear-facing longer. We have what we call a convertible seat. That means I can use it rear-facing, and it's a little bit bigger than your traditional infant seat. But we want to keep our children rear-facing until they're at least 2 years old. Longer if they are within the height and weight of the seat. And the reason it's so important to keep that child rear-facing is it gives time for their really vital organs, their head, neck, and back, to develop and strengthen, so if they are in a crash, they can better withstand that crash.
Now, what about, because I know I have a 2-year-old, right? And some kids are bigger than other kids, and if their legs are a little bit long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still okay to be rear-facing? Or how does a parent understand when it's okay to transition?
So you're right. I hear that commonly from parents that they're really concerned about their legs. They're kicking the back of the seat. They're all curled up. And quite frequently what we find is that the kids are more comfortable this way because they actually have something to lay their feet on. If you go forward-facing too soon, their feet dangle. And if you've ever been on a high seat before where your feet don't touch the ground and how uncomfortable that is, that's similar to kids going forward-facing too soon. Here they can curl their legs up. They can hit the back of the seat. But the reason that we're not concerned about that is rear-facing better protects that head, neck, and back.
Right.
And leg injuries are very seldom a concern in crashes.
Right.
And we'd rather protect those more vital head, neck, and back by keeping them rear-facing longer.
Sure. One of the things I can tell you as a parent, sometimes it can be hard to remember where to put the harness or maybe how to level the seat. Can you kind of go over a few of the things that parents should look for when they're properly installing a car seat?
So let's talk about the installation first.
Sure.
So we want a rear-facing seat to be correctly reclined. Mm-hmm. And there's usually some type of recline indicator on the seat. And on this one, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a line that says it should be level to the ground. And most rear-facing seats have some type of mechanism, a foot or a lever that will help with that recline. Mm-hmm. And occasionally you don't get enough recline, so you can use a rolled-up receiving blanket, and the only time you can ever use that is when a child is rear-facing, and you can put it at the base of the seat to help with that recline. And then at the belt path, and the belt path is where the seat belt goes through the car seat, we want to make sure that we have a nice snug fit. So at the belt path, with our hand, we want to make sure it's moving less than an inch from side to side or front and back. And that helps make sure that we've got the correct install for rear facing.
And can any parent install a car seat, or do you need to seek help from a certified car seat installation technician?
Parents, just like kids, parents have all sorts of capabilities.
Yeah.
So we do often recommend that they go through the owner's manual, read it, and try that installation for themselves.
Okay.
And it's really, really important to follow. Now, we do realize those manuals can be somewhat confusing.
Right.
So if you're at a point where you are having a challenge installing that seat, you don't feel comfortable with that seat, or even if you just want to check to make sure that you did it correctly, you're welcome to make an appointment. We have car seat clinics and community events throughout the Fort County Safe Kids Coalition area of Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Washington, and Waukesha counties. And that's what we do. We help go through the seat with you, as well as help you to install it, so you feel comfortable with that.
Now, the dummy or the doll we have here is roughly, how old would you say a child this size is?
So this doll is a 16-month-old. Okay. So I picked this so you can show that it is okay to keep your child rear facing longer. And again, with that rear facing, what this seat does is in a crash, it helps to cradle that head, back, and neck by keeping them rear facing. And you want to keep your child rear facing until at least 2. Longer if possible, as long as the child is within the weight and height of the seat. Mm-hmm. So I can tell that this child is within the weight and height of the seat because there's more than an inch of seat above the head. So okay. For rear facing, we want to make sure there's at least an inch of seat above the top of the child's head for correct head support. And then we want to make sure they're within the weight guidelines of the harness.
Okay. Now, I know with my kids, sometimes it can be challenging to get my child in the car seat if I'm at the grocery store and maybe they're not having a great day and they're kicking and screaming or it's raining and I move quickly, mm-hmm. right? And sometimes, like, the strap might get twisted or I might not have the harness in the exact right spot. Can you talk about how important it is for some of those things to be done correctly?
Sure. So many people are so focused on the install, making sure the install is what's important, but it's the harness that's just as important, because if you think about it, that's what's holding your child in. We want that harness to lay nice and flat on the child, because in a crash, it's going to distribute that crash force over the strong part of the child, over the shoulders and over the hips. Okay. So we want that to lie flat, and we want it to be on correctly. So for rear facing, we want the harness to come out of the back of the seat at or below the top of the shoulders. And you can see this is just a little bit below the shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then we want to make sure that we have a nice snug fit. So at the shoulder, we can't pinch any of the harness. If we can pinch, it's too loose and we need to tighten up. Okay. And I know parents are concerned about over-tightening, and that seldom happens. Usually we see it much too loose. A way to make sure that you haven't over-tightened is, can you easily get your finger between the harness and the shoulder? If you can, then you haven't over-tightened. Okay. And then the last step is this chest clip. This chest clip always needs to be at armpit level. One way to make sure it's at armpit level is if I stick my fingers in the baby's armpit, that chest clip should be level with my fingers.
Okay. Now, I'm looking at this child wearing a t-shirt, and that looks great. It's summertime. Let's say it's January, and it's 20 below zero, and we're in Wisconsin. Can I put a child in a nice puffy coat, keep them nice and warm, or?
So, parents, this is a common concern too. Okay. Parents want to make sure their child's comfortable and warm. Mm-hmm. Now, with the big puffy coats or the snow suits, we don't recommend using those. What we recommend instead is the thin layers like fleece or Thinsulate. Mm-hmm. Because if you use those big bulky coats, what you're harnessing is the coat and not the child. So this is a challenge I can make to parents to try sometime. In the wintertime, when you have those big bulky coats on, try harnessing your child on, or try harnessing your child in. And even though we recommend loosening and harnessing the seat each and every time you take your child out and putting them in, this time just take the harness off, take the coat off and put the child back on, and you'll see there's a big gap in the harness. Yeah. And now we've just talked about how important it is to have a nice snug harness. Mm-hmm. And so in a crash, what happens is all that bulky material compresses, and you've got wiggle room. And we don't want wiggle room, because if there's movement in the child, there's more potential for injury.
Okay. Now, how does what you just described change when we transition then to a forward-facing seat?
Okay. So right next door, we have a forward-facing child. And this is a 3-year-old doll. Okay. So forward-facing, we want to make sure that, again, the child is nice and snug, that we've passed the pinch test. But now the difference is for forward-facing, we want to make sure that the harness comes out of the back of the seat at or above the shoulder. And so both the rear-facing at or below and the forward-facing at or above is very important to follow that, because with crash dynamics, that's what's holding the child in, and that can affect how the seat crashes. And again, we still want to make sure that chest clip is at armpit level.
Sure.
Now, a little bit of a difference to tell if your child is outgrown a forward-facing seat is we've got 2 more slots in the seat. When the child's shoulder is above that top slot, the harness is no longer at or above.
Right.
So they've outgrown the height. We also need to make sure that the tops of the ears are below whatever head support is there.
Okay.
So rear facing, the top of the head needed to be an inch below. Forward facing, the ears need to be below whatever head support. And here's a little known item that even for adults, we need to make sure that we have head support too. So the tops of our ears should be below whatever head support is there. So in a crash, we're less likely to get whiplash or other head and neck injuries.
Oh, interesting. And then, so we transition then to a booster seat after that. Is that correct?
Yeah. And here we have a booster seat, and this is a 6-year-old child.
Okay.
And there are different types of booster seats. I chose to use a no back or a low back.
Okay.
There are also high backs, and people often ask what are the differences. Booster seats are designed to boost that child up so that adult seatbelt is fitting them correctly. So when you have a child in a booster seat, you want to make sure the lap belt is over the bony part of the hips, the strong part of the body, and not riding up on the soft tummy.
Okay.
And the shoulder part is in the middle of the shoulder. If it's starting to fall off or rubbing on the neck, you might want to consider a different booster seat. Or there are guides that come with mini booster seats that you can use, but we want to keep that shoulder belt in the middle of the shoulder across the strong part of the body.
And at what age then can a child stop using a booster seat?
Well, with Wisconsin law, they can go into a booster seat when they've reached both 4 years and 40 pounds.
Okay.
But that's a minimum requirement. We actually recommend to keep your child safer to keep them in a 5-point harness as long as possible, as long as they're within the height and weight guidelines of the seat. That 5-point of contact that harness makes, 1 over each shoulder, one over each hip, and then between the legs, that 5 points of protection is going to keep your child more snug in a crash. Where now we're talking 3 points of protection. So keep them in a harness as long as possible. You can tell when your child is ready to transition out of a booster seat and into a seatbelt by itself, minimally by Wisconsin law when they reach 8 years or 80 pounds or 4'9". That's the minimum requirement by law. But it's at 4'9" that's a better indicator. They're a little bit more adult height, so that seatbelt will fit them a little bit better. And then we suggest a 5-point test. So when you think your child's ready to be out of a booster seat, have your child sit in the seat, buckle them in. Can they have a slight bend in their knee? Because if their leg's flat like this, they're going to scooch down to get that bend, and that seatbelt's going to be thrown off. Make sure they can have a slight bend in the knee. The lap part, this is part 2, the lap part goes over the bony part of their body, other hips. Part 3 is the shoulder belt is across their shoulder. Part 4 is they can sit all the way back, and Part 5 is that they can do that the whole trip. Because sometimes you buckle a child into a seatbelt, they look good, 5 minutes down the road, they've slumped down so that seatbelt's completely not fitting them anymore, and that might be an indication they should still stay in a booster seat.
So as a parent, I know buying all these car seats and booster seats, it could be expensive, right? And it's an investment you're making for the safety of your child, so it's a good investment. What recommendations do you have for parents who are considering maybe buying a used car seat? Do you think that's a good idea, or what kind of caution should they have when they do that?
We do have concerns about used car seats because we want to make sure that you know the history. If the seat has ever been in a crash, most likely it shouldn't be used. Used seats, you don't know if all the parts are there. And it's very hard to tell if all the parts are there or if there's anything wrong with the seat. Now, if for somebody that might not be able to afford a brand new seat, if they have a family member that they know the history, the seat's not been under recall, and it's not had any damage, I think it's okay to borrow a seat from somebody you know. But we don't ever recommend going to a garage sale or some type of secondhand store and buy a car seat that way, because there's just not enough known. And is it worth the risk of putting your child in it in a crash? It just may not hold up.
And how long does a car seat last? I mean, if it's been around for 10, 15 years, is that okay? Do they expire? Or?
They do expire. Traditionally, the expiration date has been about 6 years. And there is a label on the seat, or if not all labels have the actual expiration date, but they do have the manufacturer and model number and date, or you can refer to the owner's manual or the the handbook that goes with the seat. And the reason is the materials in the seat start to break down. And in a crash, they just may not hold up. Now, some of the newer seats that go to higher weights do have a little bit of an extended lifespan. They may go up to about 8 years before they need to be replaced.
Now, when a child is in the back seat, at what point in time is it okay to transition a child to actually the front seat? Is there an age that it's okay finally to maybe ride in the front?
We recommend 12 and under stay in the back seat.
Okay.
At 13, again, a parental decision, is the child mature enough to sit in the front seat without causing distractions? But 12 and under in the back seat, and part of that is so their body has time to develop and grow. They're more at risk for injury in that front seat.
And I know a lot of people may remember the time when they were a child themselves and maybe weren't in a car seat or riding in the front seat when they were a young child. Do you see that a lot when you're working with families, talking about maybe, I was fine when I was a kid, so why do I have to go through all this effort of making sure my child is riding safely? How do you talk to parents to convince them to make the effort to make sure their kid is riding safely?
Fortunately, we rarely hear that. I think there's just so much education out there, and there's so many statistics that prove how important car seats are.
Yeah.
That if parents or caregivers have questions, once you talk with them, show them those statistics, show how important those car seats are, it doesn't take much to convince them about the necessity of using it and using it correctly.
And what role then does the driver have in ensuring the child is safe in the back seat? Like, safe driving is important too, right?
Right. And that is a good question, because a lot of times parents, when they come into, especially with those newborns, they want to place their baby in a position in their vehicle so they can turn around and see the baby. And our concern with that is you now become a distracted driver and you could potentially crash. So we always recommend make yourself safe. If your child is fussing, and as parents we tend to know those fusses. Is it like, I just want a little bit of attention, or is it something that's really serious? But if it's something that you need to give your child attention, pull over off the road, make both you and your child safe.
Now, you brought up something about where the car seat is in the back seat. Is there a safer position for the car seat in the back seat?
If you have just one child, usually we recommend the middle back seat, because you can never predict where a crash is going to occur. And in that middle back seat, you're furthest from any possible point of impact. But the reality of trying to do that with multiple children isn't as high. So if the middle seat doesn't work for you, then we usually talk with the parent to see what is realistic for them, because everybody has a little bit of a different situation. If possible, we then recommend the child gets placed behind the passenger, because when you're driving, if you do a lot of street parking, that you're now parked with that door open to the sidewalk.
That's a good idea.
So you're not behind the driver getting the toddler, who you might be fussy, out into the busy road. You're getting out onto the sidewalk. So there's lots of things that go into figuring out the correct position for the car seat and your family needs.
We covered a lot today in this conversation. If parents have additional questions about car seat installation, or if they're looking for resources or looking for help, what should they do?
The best bet is to go to safekidswi.org. That's the local Safe Kids Wisconsin coalition, and they can connect with the coalition in their area and what events might be going on or what possible fitting stations they might be accessible.
Lisa, thank you so much. This was really enjoyable, and I learned a lot today.
Thank you.
And for everybody watching at home, please go ahead and click the like button. If you liked what you saw today, let us know. Click the like button. And we'd also love to hear from you. If you have ideas on topics for us to showcase on our live videos, let us know. We want to hear from you. So thank you so much.